All right, so if you ever heard me do a preview for one of the Texans games, then you'll know that I have some pretty strong thoughts about Deshaun Watson, at least compared to what all the other people kind of talk about football for a living seem to think. So, given all the trade stuff that's happening and all the fucking wild stuff I've seen about what teams should or should not do to get him, I feel pretty obligated to make a video to fight back on a lot of this. So, first, I will say though. I'm not that shit about like, oh, this be like, because some people say this like, oh, Deshaun's not a good teammate or like he should be loyal to. Nah, fuck that. That's dumb. This isn't about that at all. I think he probably is a really good teammate. I bet you, everyone in that locker room loves him. I wouldn't be surprised at all about that. That's not what I'm going to talk about at all. What I'm going to fight back on is this concept that he's like all that good and that he's worth fucking trading all of your franchise's picks for. It's absolutely not. So Deshaun Watson, right? Because people talk about him, because even throughout this year they talk about him as like the second best quarterback in the NFL, even a fucking top 5 guy. Absolutely not. I'll get to a list through guys I go through this video of guys that are better than him, like pretty unquestionably. But I really got to, because that shit is wild and just inaccurate. So the first thing, just with this game, that's what I'm going to talk about. Because like I said, I got no criticisms of him as a person or nothing like that. I'm just going to talk about the problems you get when you have Deshaun Watson as your quarterback. So the main one is with a guy like him, right? And the way the Texans play their offense is and this is going to be the quarterbacks I compare him to right now, are teams that really depend on their quarterback to drive their offense up and down the field, right? Because the Texans, so actually schematically, I don't think they're that bad. To be honest, they do some interesting things, especially with the way they use him, just outside the pocket, not like full rollouts, but these like RPOs, the things that they do are actually pretty interesting. But that's the thing is quarterbacks like him where they're expected to do everything for their offense because they can, so they should, which is a stupid way to do things. Offenses that do that are garbage. Hence the Cardinals is the main one I'm talking about, who does that to a stupid degree. But so with Deshaun Watson, he actually as a quarterback does not have like a high floor, right? Because that's what people want to talk about. And they say, okay, well, when you're on your team, you're at least, going to score this many points, or like you're going to at least be able to do this stuff. And well, yardage wise and through like the course of a game, that can end up being true, but like as a useful, like while the game is competitive, useful stats, that's not really the case. So I went back, like he, compared to all these other quarterbacks, and the ones I'm going to talk about here, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, right? Because those are the other quarterbacks, and Josh Allen too, I'm going to get to, because those are the other quarterbacks in the NFL that like are really the main engine of their offense. I'm not even like Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, the other two. They both do have better like offenses around them, and B, they're just not in such a completely different tier from Watson and these guys I'm talking about. I'm not even going to bother. They're just way better. But so first one is Deshaun Watson. So since he's played, right, as his first full year as a starter, right, he had 4 games where he got kept under 20. 4 games. Now, that's not crazy, and there are quarterbacks who do a lot worse. And let's be clear, too, before I get into it, I'm not going to say some shit like Deshaun Watson's not like a top fucking 20 quarterback. That's stupid, too. Like, he's clearly better than a lot of guys, but I just want to fight back on his actual value. So, yeah, he had 4 as a rookie where he scored in the below 20s. So, then he still had 4 coming back the next year as a sophomore and 3 this year. Now, one of those this year was in the crazy weather game in Cleveland, so I'm not really going to count that against him. But still, overall, that's 11 in 3 years. And that includes, and this is a really important part here, that includes 3 where he's kept into the single digits, which should, like, theoretically, for the way people talk about him, it should be fucking impossible. Because if you look at other quarterbacks, like ones I get to, that does not happen to Patrick Mahomes. That does not happen to Aaron Rodgers. It does not happen to Russell Wilson. So, yeah, these other guys, so Kyler Murray, right, he has 5 as a rookie. That's a fucking ton. That's more than Watson ever put up. But some things with that. One, that was his rookie year, obviously. So it's only 1 more than Watson, right, as a rookie. And 2, his offense was a whole lot fucking worse. Cliff Kingsbury is just not a good offensive coach. So he has this reputation of it, right, because of what happened at like Texas Tech. And he's like, oh, these spread guys, he can do all this smart stuff. And he does a lot of like window dressing, and he does a lot of like goofy stuff, but actual like efficiency wise and effectiveness, his offenses are pretty garbage. And you can see like the sum of their parts this year was bad. They should have been way better offensively, despite how good statistically they were. Like in terms of meaningfully moving the ball up and down the field consistently and scoring points when it mattered, they're just not very good at it. But even given that, this year, right, he only had two. He only had two where he was kept in the double digits, into below 20. So then you talk about Lamar Jackson, right? That's the next one. So Lamar is the king of this fucking category. He had one as a rookie, which was in the playoffs. He had one as a sophomore, which was in the playoffs. And he had two this year. One was in the playoffs where he missed the entire fourth quarter, which wasn't the single digit, but again, he missed the whole fourth quarter. So you can count that, I guess, sure. So it's one over his whole career, right? But whatever. I mean, that's borderline impossible, right? And there's no single digit games across that whole time, outside the one I just mentioned. All the other ones are in the upper 20s or upper teens. So then, and then I mentioned Watson, then Russell Wilson, right? So Russell Wilson, I think, is the closest direct play style comparison to Deshaun Watson in terms of what they like actually do on the field. The other one, actually, funny enough, and this is just something I think about before, is Gardner Minshew. Does a lot of the same stuff. No, Gardner Minshew, I think I've come around to being worse this year than Deshaun Watson for sure. But I mean, I thought that last year too. But like those guys, I would say, of the like tiers of that play style, or Russ, Watson, or Minshew. The shit don't matter. So yeah, Russell Wilson had 5 the previous year, which is a ton, right? But he plays in the single worst offensive infrastructure in the entire NFL. His receivers are not the worst, for sure. They're pretty good, but the way that they call plays in Seattle is ungodly awful. Their offensive line is much worse than like the Texans or any of these other teams, and they're just the idea of what works offensively is just horrible. So he had 5 last year, but like I said, that was in the worst offensive situation in the NFL. There's probably, I said that there's probably like a fucking 1-15 team, like the Steelers with no one but again last year would be an example, but structure wise, that holds up. And then, and through that, there was 0 in the single digits the whole time. What that illustrates, right, is that with these other guys, despite having whatever struggles you have offensively or like guys missing from injury, all that shit, you can still expect like this baseline of points. Deshaun Watson doesn't provide that to the same level. Now, is he a whole lot worse? No, but over the course, I mean, this is the difference of what? So Lamar has 4 total, right? Watson has multiple seasons with 4. He has 11, right? And over the course of 3 years, I'm talking about 11 games is a fucking ton. That's a whole lot, including ones in the single digits. So his floor is just not there, and that bears out if you ever watch him play for an extended period of time, and not just highlight shit, because I can see where that would be confusing with him. He constantly misreads defenses. He constantly misses open receivers, or even worse, he constantly like physically misses them with the ball and throws the ball into the dirt at their feet. Now, is he as bad as like I don't know, like a Nick Mullins at that? No, but compared to the way he gets talked about, people just gloss over his issues and make excuses for him way too much. Now, his high-end plays are there for sure, given, like I mentioned, the highlights, and they, like, at the high end can even match, visually what, like, Mahomes or Russell Wilson does. The problem with that is his frequency of those is a whole lot lower than all those other guys, too. I mean, it's not even comparable. The vast majority of the time, if you actually watch a Texans game, where he starts to like do something like that, ends with him running out of bounds a yard behind the line of scrimmage. That's like what happens almost the whole time, or missing the receiver. No, he'll hit some of them, like I said, and that'll provide the highlights. But his actual ability to consistently create plays like that and to move the ball down the field is not all that good. He does have the special plays at the high end, but again, it's just not a frequent enough thing, which clearly bears out in the way that the Texans have played with him as their quarterback, right? Like they had that season in the playoffs last year, which was, I don't know, whatever, sure. Were they a really good team? No, they won a bunch of like close games that were kind of meh. And this year you saw that despite still having, which is the next thing we could do, still having a pretty good offensive situation, he's not enough to fix all these problems that people like think, oh, if we just had him as quarterback, we're going to be able to do all this stuff. That's just clearly not the case. So his offensive situations. This is another thing that I want, because people who don't watch the Texans or don't quite on. his offensive situation this year is nowhere near as bad as people want to make it out to be. Like, people want to talk about, like, oh, it was him versus the world, or, like, it was just him by itself. That is just plainly not true, right? So, the beginning of the year, his receiving core was, like, in the top 5 in football. And I do include, like, after the trade of DeAndre Hopkins. I have my own problems with DeAndre Hopkins. He's really good at a lot of things. He's a top 10 receiver, for sure, all that. But their receiving core this year, going into the year, Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, all legitimately really good. Like, really good. Will Fuller is, like, probably, I don't know, one of the top 3-4 deep threats, like, the way people talk about deep threats in terms of that's his main skill. He's a whole lot more than that, though. He actually separates at all levels of the field pretty consistently. He can do stuff after the catch. Like, he's a legitimately really good receiver. Brandon Cooks gets super underrated because all the trades he's been through and the fact that he got traded for DeAndre Hopkins. Again, that guy separates all over the field a lot. He actually has ball skills a lot of times. And as a after the catch guy, he's good too. Like, he's a legitimately good receiver. And Randall Cobb, same thing. People want to roast him because he's old and he signed a bad contract, but that guy gets open all the time in the slot, consistently, even versus good defenders. He did it last year on the Cowboys. He did it his whole career on the Packers. He did it this year too when he was healthy. So he had good receivers. His tight ends were fine, right? Darren Fells and Jordan Akins are fine. They're no worse than most teams have, really. Like, they're meet the NFL standard. There's only like 6 good tight ends total, so they're not them, but they're fine. And the offensive line, people want to talk about that shit all the time. Deshaun Watson causes fucking 75% of their problems, for sure. Like, Titus Howard and Laremy Tunsil are one of the, like, a top half tackle duo. Again, Titus Howard's been nowhere near as bad as people think he's been because Deshaun Watson causes him to give up pressures every other play because he's running around for 6 seconds doing nothing. Like, Titus Howard's not bad. And their interior, too. Like, their interior isn't of this level because to be bad, right, enough to tank an offense's interior offensive line, you have to be so unholy awful, right, that it just doesn't really happen very frequently. And the Texans are nowhere near that standard. Like, Zach Fulton was bad, for sure. This guard who played the start of the year, he was bad. But is he any worse than, like, what Joe Burrow and the Bengals dealt with? No. Is he any worse than what, like, Kirk Cousins with the Vikings deals with? No. And there are other guys, Senio Kelamite, Zach Sharpring, like, they were actually okay, right? And Nick Martin, even their center, who's not, like, nothing special, but he also isn't that bad. Like, none of their linemen play that bad. So then when they give up a bunch of pressures, people are like, oh, they just don't gel as a unit or whatever. But no, it's because Deshaun Watson caused all that shit. And so I feel like I should reiterate again, just because I'm being super negative about this, that I have literally no problem with Deshaun Watson. Actually, I think it's pretty cool. Like, all that shit at Clemson with a championship, all that stuff. Like I said, he sounds like he'd probably be dope as a teammate. But given all the problems I'm listing, the idea that, like, people want teams to trade fucking 4 first-round picks for him is nuts. And he's about to start a big-ass contract, right? So he's about to get off his rookie deal. He's going to get $40 million as a cap hit for his first, like, 3 or 4 years on that deal. Absolutely not. He's literally shown, just like, accept what he's telling you as a quarterback when he plays. He's shown that he's not good enough to make up for deficiencies on your team to a level that allows you to reach, like, a true contender, the way that Patrick Mahomes is, like, when they had, like, a historically bad defense, right? And he still took him to the Super Bowl. Or I guess that was the AFC Championship game, but clearly they could have won that game. You understand what I'm saying? Russell Wilson had, like, literally the worst defense of all time for the first 6 weeks of the season, and he was 6-0, right? And even like guys like Josh Allen this year, where their defense got pretty overrated, I think, as the way their offense played and was able to actually keep the ball and move the ball up and down the field, something that the Texans can't do, made up for a lot of that. And that's another thing, too, so I mentioned Josh Allen, because Josh Allen is another one who I actually think I'm pretty close to Deshaun Watson in terms of play style. And Josh Allen, for sure, has the same issues with a really low floor as Deshaun Watson does. Last year, he had 10 games below 20, which is a ton, way more than double any of these other guys I've talked about in 1 year, or at double. And he had 4 this year still, despite having Stephon Diggs, the way their offense played. But you saw what happened is they're legitimately, like, really good team despite the issues that they have defensively. Now, is their defense better than, like, the Texans this year? Of course, but that's the idea, right, with a quarterback like this, is when you put enough around him, then your offense isn't just stat-wise, it is, like, functionality-wise elite, which is what happened with the Bills this year. Texans have not been that. Despite what Deshaun Watson was second in the NFL passing, they were not a functionally dominant offense or even remotely close to it. And that's a huge problem you have with him as a quarterback. Now, all that being said, just the conclusion of that shit, if you're the vast majority of teams, you should not be trading anything of meaningful value for him, really, because you're just going to get stuck in the same situation the Texans are now. But there are two really, really, really notable exceptions to this. The one, which is the less notable, the two is the Dolphins. Brian Flores, I think, is a fantastic coach. And given the status of what their defense should be for the next 2 years going forward, Deshaun Watson would meet more than probably clear the level of good enough offensively to not suck. Because even though he would still have games where he put up I keep saying double digits when I mean the teens, points in the teens, the defense actually is functionally good enough to still win games that way, and Watson's ceiling at least can compete in a single game sample size with guys like Patrick Mahomes. But the more important one, this is the main one I would talk about, is the 49ers. The 49ers, I feel the complete opposite way of every other team, basically, who I think should not even bother with the price tag associated with Deshaun Watson. 49ers should give up whatever the fuck they need to get him. Because Kyle Shanahan solves all of the issues that Deshaun Watson has and leaves only that upper tier, which is what makes Deshaun Watson a top 10 quarterback as opposed to someone like Gardner Minshew, right? It's because Kyle Shanahan knows how to scheme offense not just consistently, constantly creating movement up and down the field. The 49ers teams versus good defense with Nick Mullins at quarterback were still moving the ball pretty well. With Deshaun Watson, he can clearly functionally do all that while he will still cause his team to fail offensively multiple times a game. It's not going to be enough to tank them or not even close, right? Because two punts isn't that big of a deal over the course of a full game. So Kyle Shanahan completely raising the floor of ball movements and points too, just with the way they schemes the run game, way up there, and then adding that little magic dust from Deshaun Watson at the top. That's a Super Bowl team, pretty much 100%. So that is the one real notable exception, I'll say. But I just overall, I feel like I needed to make this video because people got to chill with this Deshaun Watson shit. No problem with him as a player; he's pretty cool and all that stuff, but you gotta realize what you're actually getting with him as a quarterback.